Right, a very good evening to you, and hoping that all is well with you from wherever you are watching, as this is a special edition, a conversation on the 23rd edition of Liberation Day here in Rwanda. It's a conversation that we are very honored to have the President of the Republic of Rwanda joining us right here on the program. I'll also be introducing the other people who are with us right here in the program, but my name as always is Eugene Anangwe. Now, we have President Kagame right here with us. Thank you so much for making time for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Also with us is Yann Gwet, who is a political commentator, who will also be joining us on this conversation. Thank you, Yann, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Christopher Kayumba is also a commentator on political affairs. He's also joining us on this conversation. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you for your
Mr. President, a busy day it was for you, definitely crisscrossing the country, sharing the message of liberation to the various citizens that you've been meeting.
Yes.
But today is more than just a date for the many Rwandans who continue to enjoy peace, the economic development and growth for this country. But it would be interesting to hear from you. What exactly does this day mean to you as a key person who played a major role in this whole process?
Well, it's a kind of milestone for me personally, but more importantly for the country. Looking at 23 years from the day we started remembering how far we have come in the last 23 years in the process of that liberation. Many things have happened, ups and downs. But overall, I think the country has made progress. And well, personally, I'm happy to be part of that process, and having made my own contribution to that overall progress, the way I think it has happened. And we can only hope that things will continue to be stable and continue to grow and improve in the right direction. That's what we expect.
But when you look at the whole journey of liberation, I mean, it's more than just the political liberation. There's a lot of other elements that are involved in there. But of course, 23 years is such, it could be long or short depending on when you were born. For 23-year-olds who were born 23 years ago, how do they relate to this process? Because at the end of the day, this is something that we want to see continuity. They didn't take part in the struggle, but they are here to enjoy the fruits of the struggle. But how do they now get that mindset in them of this whole process of liberation?
Yeah. Earlier, when I was meeting the population in rural area where we are today, in Ishira and in Nyabihu, and people from all different parts of the country, especially in that area, I was reminding them that liberation really means a couple of things. It is getting rid of bad politics and leaders who brought about this tragedy the country faced in our history. So removing them physically or otherwise is not enough. You've got to deal with what has come as a consequence. You've got to deal with security, you've got to deal with socio-economic issues, you've got to make sure we fight poverty. We see people really improving their living standards and being able to work, being able to find that place, that environment where they think that there is a tomorrow, there is a future for them, and maybe if we can make them happy that together we can find this path to prosperity.
Right. We have political observers, and it's important that we also bring them in this conversation. Yann, personally, as a friend of Rwanda as well, I mean, what is your quick thought about what the president has been saying, and of course the whole process and journey of liberation?
Well, I'd like to, of course, I have nothing much to add, but I'll just, if I can just make a quick comment on that. I feel, as an African, I feel that, of course, this day is first and foremost a great day for Rwanda, but I also think that, or I hope that it's also a great day for Africa. And especially, we can see that day as a victory of the idea that we Africans can really forge our own path. So I think it's also about that, and in that sense, I'll also include, if I may, Africa in that whole process.
Right. Dr. Kayumba.
You know, before I came here, I was lucky to be invited at another gathering where young people, the people you asked in 23, 18, 19, they wanted me to talk about liberation. So I thought what to talk about on a day like this. I remembered a story on September 1990, when I was 18 in the grade 2 in Uganda, in the middle of Kampala, in a place called Rubiri Barracks. At the time, it was occupied by NRA 1st Battalion 301 Brigade. And September 30th, 1990 is when Rwandese who were in NRA escaped. I still vividly remember that escape. When I came out from school around 8 p.m., I saw one of the Rwandese soldiers I had known. Then when I returned to my brother's house who was living there, I visited another one. And these people had been, you know, we are talking about today's liberation. You know, His Excellency was talking about the speech he gave. But before the 1st of October, the liberation, the first day the RPA soldiers attacked, they had been organizing, preparing the president will help us, from after 1986, when NRA took over, and then preparing in countries, in conditions, in context whereby if it had been known before, probably we would never have come. And if these people who were in NRA, in other places, were selfish, because I still remember friends and my elders at the time who were in NRA looking after us, they had good families, good wives, young kids.
Right.
So when I remember the story and what they did and what they were thinking at the time, you know, we were thinking about statelessness and the liberation, because when we talk about liberation, we need to define it in human terms, in our lives. You know, freedom.
But the point I'm looking for from you actually is what His Excellency actually said here about the youth and how the continuity can go on, so that this day for the young people is not just a day on the calendar to have free holiday, not going to school today. We are just going to be having a good time, and you know, let's go and have a good time. As scholars, how do you actually ensure this continuity of holding this day as a very important, or give it the significance it deserves?
And I suppose that's what His Excellency was talking about. How do you, who is a liberator?
Yeah, I want to hear from you.
Yeah, we were talking, that's where I was telling, what I was telling you, that a liberator is somebody who is able to define a problem, define a problem, then design how to resolve it. And at the time, I'm telling you, when they attacked 1st of October, they had a problem of humiliation living outside your country. We were stateless. We wanted a nation. But after you get a nation, how do you move it forward? Now you start defining it in terms of removing structural conditions that still hold people back. Issues of poverty, issues of ignorance, issues of lack of freedom of expression, issues of independence and sovereignty. You know, when you talk about sovereignty, you are talking about, if you see what is happening today, now that we are moving around elections,
Yes.
you will find foreigners
Yes.
talking about, for example, how the Electoral Commission should behave or shouldn't
We'll
behave.
actually touch on that, and probably, Mr. President, he seems not to actually answer my question on the role of scholars and other players in actually ensuring continuity, ensuring continuity among the young people who have, never experienced anything of that, but were born after it. What would you expect from other institutions, other players, so that what you went through as the leader of the RPA and your battalion and all those who worked hard to ensure that Rwanda is what it is today, that spirit lives on? What would you expect from people like Dr. Kayumba and others, and Rwandans in general?
But I think Kayumba and the other friend, the colleague who is here, we are giving a background, a context. I think this is useful. They are shedding light to where we are coming from and some of the things that happened at the beginning. And the other was talking about how, actually this is not just possibly confined to Rwanda. There are so many things that happen or have happened that other African countries are experiencing and are going through, and therefore maybe one thing land here, another thing land somewhere else, should always come together to free the Africans. I think they are giving a good context. Therefore, the liberation we're talking about, or the young people, the 23-year-old now, the 23-year-old has not had this burden the others have carried who were there before them. So that's on the positive side, I mean, at least as far as they're affected directly. But when they are 23, when they are 22, or even 18 and so on, Kayumba said he was 18 when he was in secondary 2 or something. Then these young people start interpreting the very things that are happening to them, their lives they're living with their families, with their parents, and so on. Then they start connecting with even the life before that, before they were really born.
Yes.
Somebody who did not witness or experience the effects and after effects immediately after genocide will start wanting to learn history, what has happened before.
Yes.
Because today we are dealing with some of those things that originate from that time. I'm sure, I mean, in Rwanda, there are many people who have lost friends, family, and so on. And others are just orphans, they don't know their parents. And they will say, there must be questioning, say, where did our parents go? What happened to them? So
And
they are
through that
learning.
process they learn.
Yeah, absolutely. They learn. And the more they learn, I think, the better they are going to be able to contribute for the future of this country. Because even if they have not lived this kind of experience, the stories that they hear, they are told, you know, in their minds, they are thinking they should, or nobody should live that kind of life, or nobody should lose their lives the way their parents, relatives, or others during that time, the way they lost their lives. So the 23-year-olds and between 0 and 23, we need to mobilize them, we need to invest in them. We need even to tell them these stories so that they don't take anything for granted, and,
Yes.
and so they can play their own role and happily they should be able to do that for a better future for the whole country.
Right. Usually when I'm moderating panel discussions and I hear panelists say we need, I get worried. Yes. Because I'm always concerned, need meaning we still haven't done it or we are not doing enough. So when do we start doing what you say we need to do, Mr. President?
Actually, it is not going to be the case that you feel you are doing enough. Mm-hmm. If also you think you are doing enough all the time, you have to start examining yourself and see whether you are really telling yourself the truth. Mm-hmm. It's never enough. What is enough? Even when you have made so much progress, I think, and people come here knowing, especially those now who are, much older, who know Rwanda at the time before liberation happened and immediately before liberation. When they come here and see Rwanda, they see a huge, very significant difference, right? Yes. And there is. But I don't think they or we would really want to think that we've done enough. We've done well, maybe, we've done so much, but what is enough when you still see people in rural areas, poor, you still see the sick who are not adequately attended to, you still see that we are not sufficiently feeding ourselves, and so on and so forth. So I think it's never enough, but that does not take away the credit of people having done so much as they could to really make a difference, the marked difference we are talking about.
Right. Yann, you've listened to what His Excellency has said. Probably for you, your quick takeaway as we prepare to move to the next item of discussion.
Well, actually, if I may, I had a question for His Excellency.
Yes.
I wanted to follow up on the part of the speech that the President brought up about the fact that Rwanda liberated from bad leadership and the next stage being freedom from poverty and depending on others. To ask him if saying that, Mr. President, you meant that, in your opinion, there will never again be bad leadership in Rwanda, and if it's not what you meant, my question will be, what are the mechanisms that your government has been putting in place to make sure that there's no more bad leadership in Rwanda?
Yes, I absolutely meant that there shouldn't be. That is really the objective. We should do everything to make sure that bad leaders don't emerge again or don't even ever emerge to mess up people's lives and the country, and even some extreme situations create tragedies like we have experienced. When in everyday life we have been talking about and working together, and this is everybody's message. I think everybody has received the message or has given the message of saying, Rwandans, let's get together. It's our country. Let's build one nation. Let's not tear it apart like it has happened in the past. It benefits no one. It only creates miseries when you are divided, when you are at each other, and it takes away all the focus and effort to build something. Then the other is, in doing that, in saying that, we can't achieve much unless we are accountable. Everybody, if you do something wrong to people, to somebody else, somebody should raise a question. Mm-hmm. or the person that has been affected should be able to raise it somewhere, and justice must prevail. So, and the more we hold leaders accountable, than just the other person who does everything wrong, I think it is going to be important, because a leader's actions have huge consequences. on people's lives. And if you are going to have a situation where leaders may do wrong things that have such a huge consequences and get away with that, you are really building up a situation that will more or less explode and be like the one we have had here or other situations that we hear about in other places. So accountability, a sense of responsibility. You know, we must be, you are a leader, you are in a position of authority. You know, depending on how you exercise that responsibility, you can bring good or disaster to people. So that, you know, the checks and the balances that have to be there are very important. And then it's not just about getting lost in between the two alone. You've got to be seeing beyond that. You say, where do you want to go? Where does the country need to be? Seeing what we are seeing in other places in this world, where development levels are so high, and you wonder how they have been there, or how they come to be there. So we want development, we want prosperity, we want, you know, if you bring these three together, I think you have a chance of having a country that is developing. It's not going to happen overnight. I don't think there are such situations where miracles happen and people wake up one morning and find they have addressed their problems. So that, and that's why there are all these struggles all the time. And that's why there are always these debates and arguments about what can be done, what is it that is required to be done. And it gives a sense of direction. It gives a sense of that check that is, you know, you want to make a step, you want to move fast, you want to do this, but there is something to remind you to say, well, are you really in the right direction? Are you doing the right thing? Are you not hurting somebody else? Is there somebody else who needs to be involved, to contribute, to benefit there? And is that happening? So this is what I would say to your question.
Right. And that actually signals us to move to the next item, which is on the elections, which are just about a month to go. And you talk of checks and balance and, of course, accountability. And quite often, Mr. President, electoral processes in Africa, and even the season itself, attracts a lot of commentary and excitement from various quarters, including foreign and local people. Now, in Kenya, the country will go for elections just about 4 days after Rwanda goes for elections in August. And right there, the European Union yesterday announced that it had deployed 30 long-term observers. And they actually expressed fears that there could be violence in Kenya after the election. Back here at home, just today, the ambassador, who is the head of the European Union delegation, Michael Ryan, did tweet, and I'll quote his tweet. He says, "Good talks today with presidential candidate Shima Rwigara." And he continued to say, "Important for credibility, the National Electoral Commission to quickly clarify why so many signatures were rejected." To them, probably this is what you say, keeping people accountable or in check of what they do. But what is it to you as the president of Rwanda?
Well, what it is to me as the president of Rwanda, first of all, I think I understand what goes on around here in Rwanda and what goes on around the world. Things are not going to happen the way you want them to happen. There are all these things that even unfair, there's a lot of injustice. There are others of good intentions, and they are positive, they are to be welcomed. Now, but let me start by this. For the Electoral Commission to be doing its duty and carrying out its responsibilities, I really hope if they are not, then we will know with the time, and it will be terrible, or we should find ways of rectifying that before it turns into a mess. But my question is, does the Electoral Commission or the Electoral Commission clarify things they should? Because the European Union representative has said so. I didn't, from the beginning, understand that the Electoral Commission should be doing its work and, or not doing its work and waiting for the European Union ambassador or representative to tell them what they should be doing, how they should be doing it, and so on and so forth. So this is a bizarre situation, but we know that's what happens. And we have to learn to live with this and work around it or with it and still make progress. But it is the same sort of interference. I've read on Twitter and the news different statements, things made, of course, where you find, you know, embassies calling the candidates to go to them, or prospective candidates, meet them, give them their complaints, and fire. No, I think there's something wrong, but I can live with it.
But what is wrong with that, Mr. President?
What is wrong is just a moment.
Yes.
Is that the diplomatic missions here are not and shouldn't be. They should not replace the Electoral Commission. They should allow the people of this country, the Electoral Commission, to do its work. And second, and in fact that's the main point I wanted to make, the same people, when you're saying what's wrong with that, are actually the same people now crying, saying people have interfered in their elections. And they are saying it should never happen. Some people are even ready to go to war, that somebody has interfered with the elections. You see what I mean? But because Rwanda cannot go to war with them, they are happy. In fact, I'm sure they tried in other places. If they could decide which candidate should win and place him or her there, they would be happy to do that, or they would be ready to do that. Or maybe they've done it in some places. You see what I mean? But, and this has nothing, the argument here I'm talking about, it has nothing to do with saying nobody should talk about what might actually be going wrong in place X, Y, or some country.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that. If anything is going wrong, people have a right to talk about it. But how far do you go? And how do you realize the implications in some situations of what you are doing? Like a heated situation you were talking about in Kenya.
Yes.
You're already anticipating violence. You're already, like they are saying. But at the same time, statements come up every now and then. No, you know, you're just adding fuel to the fire. Absolutely. That's the consequence. So do these people think about the consequences with their actions? Do they even realize that they're actually doing things that they're not supposed to be doing? They should be allowing Rwandans, other countries in Africa, to go, and whether it is a word of advice, to say, please don't do this, because if you did this, we are aware, and you know, there are many examples where things have gone terribly wrong because of elections, because of people who have cheated, because of malpractices, even by, let's say, electoral commissions, if you will. But do you just get one thing and create a standard by which to treat a situation like the whole of Africa? if something went wrong in Rwanda, would you want to take that and start applying it to all countries across Africa? Because it has happened in Rwanda, in the heart of Africa, geographically.
Right.
You don't do that.
Right. I want to hear from Dr. Kayumba, because you actually preempted this conversation somewhere saying about meddling. And the key question or key concern here is, how do we draw the line between meddling, interference, and being partners who are just meaning good? That we are here just to check and balance what is going on wherever we are.
You know, broadly, as the president says, the job of diplomats around the world, not just in Rwanda, is to meet players in a country. That would include presidential candidates. So that is okay. That is how you gather information. That is how you know the thinking, the beliefs, the ideas, the programs of aspirants. That is good. Anybody does it. All diplomats who are good, they do that. But after the information you get when you meet them, how you use that information and the effect of that information is what makes the difference. In other contexts, I would assume that Rwandan diplomats, when there are elections in other countries, they would gather information about who are the candidates, then send information in order for the country, for Rwanda to know how to deal with these people. What do they believe when we meet them? But once a diplomat, any diplomat in a country starts talking about the credibility of institutions and ranking candidates who should be accepted, for example, by the Electoral Commission, you have jumped from diplomacy into politics of the country.
So how far they're supposed to go when they gather information?
That's the point I'm making. The diplomats, their job is to represent their countries in foreign countries, get information, make sure that information is channeled back so that their interests in Rwanda are well represented. They cross the line once they start talking about how institutions here should behave, or who among the candidates, among the aspirants is better. And of course this relates to the first, what we are discussing, liberation. Liberation, what it is, liberation from what? Africa has been independent for over 50 years. And one of the biggest challenges Africa has remained with, it is that their politics is in most cases determined by Western powers. That is what Mwalimu Nyerere called Uhuru wa Bendera, you know, flag independence. Now, you know, that's why we should, I would like the president to help us, because when the struggle was launched, and he even mentioned about bad governance, they wanted to remove bad governance. They wanted to remove oppression. They wanted to remove exclusion, so that they create a condition whereby we have sustainable democracy based on the idea of national sovereignty.
Right. So
when you have,
yes.
this is very important Anangwe. When you have foreigners meddling, Mr. President,
yes,
and you think back 23 years after liberation, how far do you think RPF has traveled in achieving, because if even in the first 8-point program, democracy was, I think, number 2 on the 8-point program. Have you, if you were to give marks?
Yes. I think everything being contextual, and democracy, as you may define it, not being just an event that happens one day and another day, and you have what you want, but a process. In my view, and maybe there are the arguments that I have heard, whether here or anywhere else, that, you know, and over time, it is also about, sometimes there are contradictions, even with the same people. Because democracy, again, like many other things, you're talking about people. You're talking about people's views, expressions, about different things, their choices. And choices, if you can make a choice, it means you are free. You have the freedom. You have the freedom to make a choice. And if that choice you have made And of course, it's about elections again.
Yes.
Elections, you are talking about, people are making choices, they are expressing themselves. They express themselves differently, but they always expect the outcome, which is an expression, in the end, the majority is to be respected. And majority expression doesn't take away the right of the other who did not even express the same as the majority.
Right.
That's really, if you are able to respect the choices of the majority, the numbers, and they are saying this is what we want, and at the same time preserve the rights and freedoms of one or the other who falls out of this expression, then the whole thing is complete. So, and I think in Rwanda, we made good progress in people being able to express themselves, to make their choices heard, and going along with those that the majority necessarily does not agree with. And sometimes I have had trivialization of this, but I don't think it is correct. For example, where does, the history we have, things we have inherited.
Right.
Among, as you know, even in the political system, beyond RPF, but even including RPF, we have people who, if we were to decide what to do with them by their record in history, they should probably be behind bars.
So why are they not behind bars, Mr. President?
It is that process of trying to bring the country together, right? Well, you know what I'm talking about. When you have undertaken the process of reconciliation, when you have forgiven people who actually had the responsibility in the genocide, to allow them to be part of this. A situation where these things are happening, where you allow people to come together of different walks of life, including those otherwise, if you had gone technically to say, if you've done something wrong, especially something terrible like that, you should face justice. And allow them to say, okay, let's allow a new lease on life for these people.
But it's interesting, Mr. President, that
Yes.
these things are happening as you say them, but sadly we still have critics who feel that the room here is
It's
congested,
okay.
it's
Yes.
stuffed.
Yes.
It's a dictatorial regime.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that make you feel?
It doesn't feel me out of, that I'm out of what I should be expecting. Because as I told you at the other earlier, I said I understand the world very well. These things happen. And they happen irrespective of what you think is good that is happening also on the other side. So you've got to keep living with this kind of thing, and because as the critics say whatever they want to say, first of all, by the way, the critics say what they say when they are here. Even if they are from outside, they may still do it when they are here. Nothing happens to them. They still make the criticism. At the same time, they say, well, there's no freedom to criticize. But the other guy was here criticizing things here. So what do you mean, therefore, when somebody says, oh, there's, the situation here is really tight, it is, well, the situation that is tight would not allow these murderers of our people of yesterday to be at large, free, doing whatever they do, or even participating in the governance of the country.
Right.
If it was really tight and we had to filter, and say this one, this guy is bad, this one, no. We only want the good guys, those who agree with us, and these guys don't agree with me. When they have killed people, we can't have ordinarily say they agree with me or I need them for anything. But they are there. Right. They are also there, able, together with others, to choose who their leaders should be at a local level or at a higher national level. A situation that has no freedom, these people wouldn't be doing that.
Right.
For me, but why maybe there is a difference in what I'm saying and what we hear is that by my background and my life and so on, I've been with these people in these problems. I understand it. If somebody can sit in Washington and just read things and extrapolate and say this is what our constitution, meaning one in Washington, says, and so what I'm reading about this guy, about this government, that doesn't fit with what my country is saying. Then you say, oh, this guy is bad, or you decide to say he's half good, and that's what we go by. But there is real life here to be lived.
There is real life.
Oh, yeah. I'm here, I'm the one sitting next to the fire, so the heat that is coming is just burning me, it's not going the other side.
Right.
I don't have the same interpretation as these people. No?
Right.
I wanted to also bring in two more points, It's not like a criticism, it's an observation. Not just in Rwanda, across Africa. When you observe how we relate with Westerners, with diplomats, with people from European countries, from America, I have observed that opposition politicians tend to take their troubles there. They tend to take their challenges there. But also, I have also observed that political parties in governments across Africa, they also, when these individuals, diplomats from Western countries, say that actually what you are doing is wrong, please change your ways. We are very fast, first of all, to accept or discuss with them, but when they say we are doing very well, we really celebrate. So I am thinking, maybe the president can help us. I am thinking that both the opposition and political parties in government, they tend to have they tend to have facilitated the superior Westerner determining issues here, things that we can't do. Maybe I'm wrong, but the president can help us.
The only way I differ slightly with what you are saying, part of it is true. Again, we go back to the whole thing. Because it is true in one case, it is not true, it doesn't mean it is true for all cases in Africa. Is what I mean. Yes. Therefore, I was going to say that in a case like, I can talk about Rwanda, I don't want anybody, I would not need anybody, and then I would be the first to come out on that. I don't need anybody to praise me for anything, even for what is good for my country. I don't need anybody. I think it is good because it is good for me. And then the others, if they appreciate it or not, that's another thing. Second, I would not defend what I think is wrong, really, and not just wrong here, but being interpreted as wrong somewhere else. I cannot cover up that. I cannot justify that. I would not stand by it. For example, people talk about corruption. And I have told our partners, our friends, I don't need any lesson from them to understand that corruption is bad. So when I'm fighting corruption here, I'm not doing it to please these Western, who, by the way, themselves may be corrupt. Corruption is not African. It's not Rwandese. It cuts across the world. So this is the culture, this is the ideology, in fact, of RPF. The core of it is that. Whether around it people do wrong things here and there, this will happen again, this is what I was saying, but the core message to RPF leaders and cadres and later to all Rwandans, we should be striving to do things that we know we deserve and actually that are good to us and maybe are seen as good by others, but not to do things that are good for us, just to impress others.
Right.
So the message Kayumba was, or the issue he was raising, it has two sides to it. So that maybe also the point he's raising is not to be taken generally, that because it has happened in one place in Africa, then it happens across. Yes. In fact, there are people in Africa who stand up to all this, who don't even want that we should be here trying to justify ourselves or to the Western countries, having to impress them. No. But there are people who do it, absolutely. So the two sides of the opposition taking their grievances to the... In fact, even something else that is wrong is to try and put these Westerners in a position where they are the judges, where and what the practice we have seen, as we have seen things happen, when the opposition, even when the opposition has taken their complaints to these people, they actually accept them as genuine wholesale. They are not able to say, no, but you are also exaggerating. I think this is not true. Even when they know, they actually give them an impression that they are right. So, first of all, this is the wrong judge in the first place. We are going to. Because if saying, because they also tend to say, oh, the opposition is always right, the people in the government are always wrong. And it was by that. Now, if one time these Westerners are appreciating those in power, sometimes, again, they have appreciated them actually for the wrong things. So I would not want anybody to appreciate me for the wrong things. Because, so then the final thing I would want to say is, therefore, who is the final arbiter? Who should be the final judge? Because if you will, as human beings, or even as we are seeing in practice, all of us are capable of being wrong. Meaning the Westerners are capable of being wrong by accepting everything, the opposition, or praising those in power for the wrong things. So they are wrong. But those in power can do wrong things too, absolutely. As well as those in opposition wanting to repress these people. And of course, what you did not say maybe that also happens is even when the opposition happens to get into power, they start actually doing things they were criticizing those in power for. So it becomes a vicious cycle.
Mr. President, if I may,
Yes.
now how can
We only have 10 minutes to go.
How can we be free from this? Because if you
It's a
observe,
struggle.
how can we, because this is
Yes.
it's another prison, how can we be free if we are taking our troubles to their court and we want them to be judges?
Right.
Are we free then in that respect? How can we overcome that?
We wouldn't be free, and I wouldn't take anything to this court myself. And I don't do that. In fact, when you have your time, talk to these people. First of all, I had somebody told me, one of the embassies, the ambassador was calling every candidate. You see, what we said, abroad, how ambassadors collect information, and maybe some of ambassadors in those countries go, no, for them, the ambassadors don't go to these candidates. I mean, don't invite these candidates to come and explain themselves to them. Maybe they go to them. You see? Here, they summon them. So, and I learned that some people were doing that around, which I don't care so much about.
So you are
But when I heard about it, that on the list, that they are calling every candidate to go to them, and I said, if I heard that anyone in RPF went there, oh, then that's it. Actually, they would be in trouble with me. I can't allow my candidate, the invited leaders of the parties, they call them. So that I think the Secretary General of RPF was supposed to be summoned to go to them. But of course, the Secretary General of RPF knew better than even before I mentioned anything, that he can't go there. But if he wanted to go there to have a discussion with them, or if it was a polite way of an invitation, say, we want to learn something from you, can we, that's okay. But to invite or to summon them as if to go to explain themselves to them is something that I can't accept here.
Right. Let's move the conversation, because I'm told also we are running out of time, but allow us to also move to another key issue that actually you mentioned during the RPF Congress, and I'll quote you. You said, there is no deadline, and this is in relation to your new mandate if elected, and what should happen in the next 7 years. And you said, in the next 7 years, I want you and I to work together, maybe double our efforts to overcome the challenges that compelled you to ask me to stay.
Yes.
And you
I really meant it.
You really did mean
Oh, yes.
it. What are the issues that would make you, let's say, I mean, it's never too late or too early to start talking about this, because you said it's important that these conversations do start. What would be the factors that, let's say, after 2024, the people again come and say, you know what, we didn't solve those issues that made us call you back. We want you back. What would be the issues that would make you either say yes or no?
Well, you want me to answer the question of 2024 now? No, I think I would answer it when I'm there. But of course, since I will be with them along the way,
Yes.
And since I have put it to them,
Yes.
I think everybody understands what I was talking about. They were worried about the fragility of the politics of this country, and which anything can make go wrong. You understand? They also may be mindful, it's the unity of this country. You know, this situation of politics is not going to be a black and white issue. There are always many gray areas. And the worry, sometimes we're having to hold things together because of our past and history, which shouldn't ever be trivialized. And therefore, if people are saying, no, but give us more time, or like we were talking about the generational issues. One who is 23 now, was born at that time. There are others who were, say, 20. When you add it to 23, you have 43. You know, this one who was not deep into the mess that happened, maybe is one of those we are waiting for, who has no baggage, who cannot come and tear the country apart and divide the country. I think it was an issue of timing and allowing certain things to happen, so that maybe there emerges leaders who don't carry so much of this baggage like others would be carrying today, that you will be going through, because you are not going to pick a 23-year-old who never experienced this history now, but you are likely to pick somebody who was who was a teenager maybe. You add 23 and then he is in a position. You are sure this one is going to be different from a 60-year-old or a 50-something-year-old. So therefore, I took it from the beginning that people are saying, we are not yet ready. The wounds are still fresh. We need to allow more healing. But then more healing, okay, that's 7 years. 7 years is more healing. We should be able to gauge together how we get out of this. Because you and me or anybody, you wouldn't give a date and say, because of this date mentioned, therefore, whether you have healed or not,
it's up to you.
Go ahead with this. You know, you can't do that. We are talking about human lives. But I was saying what I said because I have a feeling that we have come so far. Good progress. Maybe if we had another 7 years, which people have asked for, really we should have moved another distance that should allow us to take a bit of risk, even if that's what they would have in their minds. This is my feeling, and I think we will work together with the people of this country to develop that feeling themselves, so that we overcome these fears that are really largely genuine. But as years go by, it cannot continue to be the same. You see what I mean? Yeah, so I don't want really to just be here, add up numbers and say, no, it's not about adding up numbers. You look at politics is a very funny, and people's lives.
Right. Yann, you haven't spoken for a long time. Let me bring you in probably as we also get closer to the closing of this conversation. Still on what the president has said, and of course, coming from a different African country, from Rwanda, Africa has always been talked of. You know, there's always been that narrative of, you know, leaders have to serve their terms and then go. If they don't, regardless of whatever scenarios are in those countries, it doesn't matter. What should be the model, probably, as we speak about Rwanda, of succession? Probably, if you could just share your thoughts on that.
Well, my general view of that is, because it brings back the issue of democracy, in a sense. So my view is that we should think about democracy as a means and not as an end in itself. So that we should talk about it not in terms of, as the president mentioned earlier, I think, so structures or term limits and so on, but more in terms of achievements. What has all that we are discussing, or the democracy or the process has achieved in terms of improving people's lives. And I think that if we think about it in that sense, not as a means, not as an end in itself, but as a means to something else, then the whole conversation changes, and that means that the answers may be different from the issue of term limits and so on. So
right.
Different conversation.
Dr. Kayumba.
You know, this idea of term limits, it is not a democratic thing. Democracy means individuals, citizens decide who and how they should be governed, and if they are not governed on that promise, they can recall that person. That term limits in most constitution is just a check to ensure that, for example, if you get somebody who has designs of staying there forever, or if you get somebody who is not good enough, can even remove the idea of voting, then they will be checked by these terms. For me, but I think especially in Africa, term limits, because there are many who have removed them and used the period they have acquired, not actually to slide back the achievement that has even been retained.
So
And because it is associated, it is associated with a negative outcome of prolonged stay, then it has become a bad thing. But as far as I am concerned, if you have a good program and you can show results for this period, I really don't have a lot of attachment to these term limits.
Right. Mr. President.
And maybe to add to
Yes.
his point,
Yes.
and also in that whole process, you are allowing people periodically to assess whether you are doing fine, and if you are not, they can remove you. You see what I mean? He's saying if they have a program and delivering and so on and so forth, that's one part which is fine. But indeed for the democracy to be complete, I'm just adding to what he said. As long as with that you have these periods in which people are able to check you, or I mean, by allowing choices to be made again. You say, so in fact, then you are giving them an opportunity to say, no, this man has been doing fine, or woman, and we can continue with him for another, yes. Or they actually haven't done well, so we can remove them. This, for me, this is the main thing. But to just say, no, well, in fact, for me, when it came to our constitution, I supported the term limits, and I even wanted to make them shorter. But I was on the wrong side of the argument, at least in as far as what the outcome we had finally. But this had more to do with my personal views and feelings, because I thought I needed to get out of the place and do some other things. So I narrowed my thinking and what I wanted to be doing to these decisions, but people who are looking at even these broader things, so it was maybe a mistake made because of my personal considerations. But people made other broader considerations and defeated me in the decision to how far or which way we go.
Right. Does this explain what Ugandan journalist Andrew Mwenda wrote in his piece, that the one spoilt vote at the RPF conference was actually yours?
Well, I can now say it safely that it was mine.
Why would you do that?
No, no, I just thought, actually what I did, I put there, instead of my name, I put there RPF. So this is what they counted as.
But why I ask you this, Mr. President, is you also have to fight, you know, a personal thought, I mean, your personal self versus what the majority of Rwandans want. And as you say it properly, that you had to make your personal decision, but it was not strong enough to overcome what the other people really wanted. It's important to hear from you. How difficult is it, or was it for you, to make this decision, to even say yes to this whole process that you personally feel should actually not have even?
It wasn't really very difficult, because at the end of the day, I have not been in the struggle. I have not been doing what I've been doing just for personal reasons, much as I have the personal side that I want to deal with. So the moment those people with whom or for whom we have struggled and done so together, unanimously were saying this, it is not very difficult to put aside my personal things. So in the end, it's not going to be very difficult.
Right. All right. This is definitely the time we had for this conversation, Mr. President. Thank you for your time, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. And of course, to our viewers who've been watching us across different platforms, we want to say a thank you for being a part of this conversation. Definitely, we are looking forward to having more. That's all the time we had right here. But of course, we'll see you again next time. Goodbye for now. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now.